Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. Sometimes on social media I feel like things just keep popping up, and this version of a card just keeps popping up in front of my face, and so I feel like it's a sign I need to try it out. I actually also had a lovely subscriber send in an image and say I might like to try making this, so here we go. Of course, I do not have the right things to make it, but you know that I will do my best to make it myself, and I think this worked out pretty good. So I do need a couple of different shades of light, almost pastels I guess, but I've got one from the Roses and one from the Harvest paper pads. Now all I'm going to do here is I need to create my own petals. If you have a die that does this, then that would be fantastic, but this is basically, at this point I wasn't sure how I was doing it, but I have got 2 pieces of paper at a time, and I am just cutting out the very rough shape of a petal. You can see that even once I cut it, I trim anything off if it doesn't look perfectly smooth, or I didn't even really know what the shape was that I was going for, but that's okay. At some point I just kept cutting, and I figured that I could use the ones that I liked and leave perhaps the ones that I don't. And as I said, I just wasn't sure how long they were. I didn't have a project sort of, I didn't have the measurements in mind, so that's okay. We can trim, we can adjust as always. As I said, if you have a die that creates petals, then your life might be made easier at this point, but I don't, and this works perfectly fine. So I'm doing that out of both shades of cardstock. Now at this point you also need to have something else. Now I am choosing to have little butterflies, so this is the dies, coordinating dies for the Flit butterfly set. There's sort of a stencil set and die that go together. I've used this in previous videos. I purchased the die, the coordinating die for the stencil, not really knowing that I would need it, but here we go. It's going to work out for this. Who knew? So the Lawn Fawn Vanilla Malt cardstock is going to be my card base today. Now I have been wanting to try out some vanilla cardstock or some cream cardstock or something like that. I got a lot of recommendations to try this one out, so I thought I would give this a go. Now it's only £100 for the card base, but I think this is going to be pretty sturdy, and actually in the end it worked out perfectly fine. I would use this again for a card base with no worries at all. Now again, all the way through this I really didn't have a plan. So eventually here I am going to end up with a 5 by 5 inch card base out of the vanilla malt cardstock, and then from here I needed to find any circles in my stash, and this was all I could come up with. So I have this Tim Holtz set here, or the Sizzix set of labels, I think they are perhaps, and there's a few that I could use in there. I then also have this one by Spellbinders, and I thought that looked really pretty too, but at this point I just was not sure, so I thought I'll die cut them all and then we'll figure it out from there. I sort of wanted the center to be layered, but it didn't particularly, it ended up slightly layered, but not quite what I thought. You could add in layers of vellum, you could add in layers of even acetate. If you had embossed the acetate, that would look fabulous. If you wanted to give it a little bit more lift, that would be fun. Anyhow, I'm going to run these through. I also did them in some plain white cardstock, but I decided I didn't like that either. So I also used some of my Hero Arts Infinity circle dies, just knowing that I could create the inside one with that. Now these ones had sort of a almost like gears look to the outside. I wasn't sure if I wanted to use those. I wasn't sure of much, but we're trial and error all the way through this card. Now I'm taking a 0 centered ruler. This is worth its weight in gold in my craft space because I don't measure a whole lot, and finding the center of things, I often eyeball everything, most things to say the least, but this card I am actually going to find the center. Now just so that you can see the center a little bit more clearly, I'm actually going to glue a little circle here. That also helps me stay on track and sort of not go wobbly in my design, because that is something I am good at. So I've got a little, just the crosshairs here to point out where the center is, and then I can put my little circle on top just roughly where I think it's going to be the center. I really do need to stay as centered as I can for this one. If you weren't sure or you're not good at that, then do it on a separate piece of cardstock and then pop it onto your card front afterwards once you can trim away the sides and make your image centered. That's what I usually do. Now this is just super simple. I'm gluing these petals down flat. You could do so many things from here. You could ink these up to give them more dimension. You could put a bone folder through the middle of them to kind of give them 3D dimension. You could do so much, but truly I stayed flat and I was really happy with it. It was not as much work. It was super easy. I'm doing one layer of this sort of pinkish coral first. And then I'm sort of moving on to the apricot-ish colour, and I want to make them a little bit haphazard, not perfectly straight, just because I think that looks a little bit more, not realistic, but you know, I think just better for me. Now, this is the Cherry Blossom stamp set from Altenew. However, I love these tiny little sentiments here, and I'm going to show you a crafting hack. This is one of my favorite things to do. So I chose a main sentiment, and then I chose a really little dainty one. So it says thank you, and then it says my dear friend down is the little tiny dainty one. So first of all, I'm going to ink up the thank, and then just make sure I didn't get any of that Y, and then because I'm going to stack these on top of each other instead of being side by side, clean off the stamp, turn it around, and then stamp out the word you underneath. I could also cut them apart, but that just stops me having to do it, and it's really easy to do it this way as well. And then I want to be able to line this up down the bottom of my circle, but sometimes it's really hard to figure out the curve that you need to get. So here's my trick. I just put my little block on top of wherever I want it to be. You can also do this on the lid of a stamping platform. I draw in a whiteboard marker just roughly around the curve, and then I stick this on top of my stamp. So I just put my stamp on my acrylic block like I normally would, nice and straight, and then I curve the edges so that they follow or stay inside of that whiteboard marker, and then I know I have the perfect curve on my stamp, rather than what I used to do, which is sort of put it one way, test it, see where it is, adjust it, test it, and then adjust it, and then test it, and then adjust it, and I still couldn't get it right. So this just means that I don't have to keep doing that. With a little whiteboard pen, I can just draw the line that I want to follow, and you can see it worked out perfectly. Now, I've flipped it over. I'm going to put a little bit of foam tape. This card has surprisingly not as much dimension as you would think. So I did add foam here, and then all I'm going to do is layer this up. I think this is called Rings Around the Circle. That's the one from Spellbinders, which gives that gorgeous little bit of decoration pointing out the edges there, and we're starting to look good. However, we are moving on to the next thing, because you'll notice I certainly did not complete the flower. So this is where it's kind of like it's a flower that sort of falls away into butterflies, perhaps. You could also use hearts. I've seen mini flowers used. I've seen so many different versions of this, but I chose to go with the butterflies because that's the one I seem to be seeing most often. So I don't know who the original creator was of this idea, or if there even was one, but I have seen these all over the place now. And as I said, it's my turn to recreate it. So I'm just doing my best with what I have, because I certainly have had to just sort of use what I have, which is absolutely fine. So again, I cut the butterflies out of the same two colors of cardstock, not introducing anything new. And as I put the butterflies down, I am creasing them in half just so that they have quite a bit of dimension. This is how I'm also going to glue them on, and they get absolutely fantastic dimension when they dry. Of course, if this goes through the mail, it's going to flatten out a little bit. I would probably give this one by hand, and I will probably make sure that that happens, but I think this is absolutely stunning. In fact, it would be worth to keep the dimension on the butterflies to build a little card box. I have a few of those on my channel if you're wanting to protect the dimension behind the butterflies. So once I had everything sort of semi-placed where I wanted it, I thought I better secure the sentiment now. I'm happy with everything how it is, and then I'm going to start gluing. Now, these butterflies are teeny tiny. They were actually the perfect size, which I was surprised. When I was thinking about this, I thought I don't really have any dies, little tiny butterflies or little tiny hearts, but actually this was the perfect die, which I had just gotten recently, so this worked out well. So let me know what you think of this card. I'm adding a little bit of detail with a fine white pen, but other than that, we are done. Thank you so much for joining me today. Links to the supplies will be down below, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye!